Hello and welcome to Maverick Dreamers and Thinkers. I'm Chloe Cho. As the year-end festivities gradually fade into a distant memory, it's so easy to get lost in the daily grind of phone calls, emails, conference calls, and meetings that can sometimes descend into shouting matches. How toxic is the culture in your workplace? We all know that it's important to stay above the fray and not lose our focus, but we sometimes can't help it, especially when things snap and we want to throw in the towel. How many times have you thought about simply walking out that door, yet only managed to stop yourself at the very last minute? If you've been struggling with a dilemma at work, perhaps my story will help you. Here's a personal and ironic account of how what I thought was my worst experience actually ended up helping me overcome some of my toughest moments. The world of television belies its image of glitz and glamour with its fair share of bullying and harassment, whether sexual or not, as high-profile cases have come to light recently. Long before Me Too became a powerful global movement via social media, there usually was a price to pay when one rejected the advances of a higher-up. I learned that the hard way. One time, a male boss slapped my butt in a slightly drunken state during an office Christmas party early on in my career. Outraged by the move, I told him to back off and to never do that again, only to learn that I had been promptly taken off air without announcement the following week. I stayed in the doghouse for about a year before I fought to get back on air, and I was only able to free myself from the shackles once he was gone the following year. Good riddance. While the incident seemed unfair, it was far from the worst. In a world where so many are striving to be in the limelight, there was no shortage of cutthroat politics and toxic culture, and perhaps what set the media scene apart from other industries was the superficial nature or vanity behind the scenes. There were catfights among peers as tempers flared. I've witnessed chairs being thrown on the newsroom floors, cars being spray-painted in an act of vengeance and vandalism over who got the anchoring gig of a primetime show, and even confronted vicious colleagues who threatened to take my life. Yet, I'm still here. Believe it or not, the perpetrators were all women who were beautifully coiffed, fully made up, and strutted around in 4-inch high heels. To be fair, as much as our jaws were to prepare the biggest stories of the moment, day in and day out, I'd say that the real headlines and the juicy drama often lurked behind the camera. Having been in the world of television since my mid-teens after getting plucked from school for an educational TV program, I think I've seen it all. When I got my very first stint on television by chance after I was selected to appear as a student on an educational TV program, I nearly passed out. Until this day, I have no idea why I was chosen over others, because there's always someone who is smarter and better looking than you. What struck me even more was that the TV station kept calling me back. The producer said that I was a natural, had a good face, and delivered well. Whatever it was, I was in awe of this new world that enabled me to dream about a seemingly glamorous life that transported me away from the stresses of school, home, and life, especially as the miracle struck just about a year or so after 2 back-to-back accidents nearly killed me. This was my secret world that let me dream about a possible future in television which seemed ever so remote. Whenever I went down to the TV station for a recording, I took as many detours as possible on my way out to check out all of the sets and props, as I was keen to take in as much of my surroundings as possible. I knew this was what I wanted to do and was meant to do. I looked up to veterans in the industry, news anchors, producers, actors, and TV personalities who seemingly waltzed around the networks with a spring in their step and oozed confidence. I could only dream of what they were doing, but how? I had no connections, no industry knowledge or training. All I could do was dream. My string of luck kept going further along my teens. I was chosen among hundreds, if not thousands, of girls to star in a high school television commercial as part of a promotional campaign, so spent a full day filming with a professional crew. Then in university, a professor approached me and asked if I would be interested in helping him with an educational TV program in French. As a French major, I was more than willing. So the story kept evolving and growing. I went from a minor TV talent in educational TV shows to eventually a student television reporter on a primetime morning show in South Korea by the time I was a senior in university, maximizing my skills in English and Korean. Much of my free time was consumed in trying to hone my craft. How do you conduct a good interview by asking the right questions and finding the right moment to break the ice? How do you put interviewees at ease so that they feel more relaxed and open up to you? How do you discern people's mood swings and behavioral patterns, which is key to making that connection? How do you hustle to get the prominent roles? This passion gave me sanity and helped me through thick and thin as I embraced adulthood. As the years went by, my early start in TV helped progress my career, but also created enemies who were unhappy about my progression. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I looked in the mirror. I saw the face of a girl whose spirit was shaken and emotions hurt, in a vulnerable condition from any angle. I was excelling at work and achieving one task after another that I had set forth since joining the TV network. Yet that seemed to be part of the problem. No matter how hard I tried, I just could not fit in. The situation was such that the higher I climbed the career ladder, the further I descended emotionally. I felt alone and unloved, a prisoner within my own workplace. Earlier that week, the situation came to a head. I was rushing into a small voicing booth in the newsroom to dub a report due for the upcoming evening news broadcast. Just as I was about to close the vault-like acoustic door, a hand reached around the door from the other side. Before I knew it, an older, overweight female colleague was standing before me after making her way in. The voicing booth was so small that there was hardly any standing room with the two of us inside. She said bluntly,
"I don't think you should be on air."
Stunned at what I thought I had heard, I blurted out, what? What did you just say?" She rephrased herself.
"Yeah, we don't think you should be on air. But you have a good voice, so why don't you just get a tape recorder and do voice recordings at home?"
My heart beat faster and sank into my stomach. But I tried to appear busy and nonchalant. I then responded, coolly, "Who exactly is we? Hey, listen, I'm about to voice this package now and I'm running late. Can you get out? I'll talk to you later." I then turned around, started adjusting the microphone, and pressed the buttons on the audio equipment to prepare for voicing. As soon as she left, I took off my headphones, sat on the chair next to me, and let out a big sigh of relief. My hands were trembling. My head was spinning, yet I consoled myself for handling the aggression well. I was glad that I did not lose my temper and escalate the situation into a heated argument or a fight. Here's a piece of advice from me. It's best to avoid conflict unless you're sure of a downright victory. A key lesson that I've learned along the way. After some thought, I figured that the older colleague was simply the messenger of a group of girls who did not like me from the start. No matter how I tried to reach out to them, nothing worked. Their behavior towards me worsened as my exposure grew at the network. Later that day, just as I was trying to blot out the smudged mascara under the eyes and powder over the streaks in my makeup, I heard footsteps coming closer to the ladies' room. I didn't want anyone to see me in tears, so I quickly moved into one of the stalls at the very corner and locked the door. 3 colleagues came in, and from what I could hear, they were clearly part of the gang that sent the older, chunky colleague to deliver the message earlier that I should not be on air. The trio chatted away and smoked a few cigarettes as I stayed quietly in the stall. I did not want to disturb the peace or trigger any sharp reactions, so I decided to remain there until they left. As fresh air breezed in through the window, the sounds of their voice began fading into the distant skies, and I began reflecting on the turmoil at hand and whether I should simply walk away, quit a job that I loved so much. That's when I had flashbacks from my mid-teens as I remembered the so-called wig incident. I will never forget that particular afternoon in 8th grade when I was attending junior high school in West Los Angeles. My day was almost ending with just one more class to go. I was standing along the hallway outdoors, sorting out my books in my locker when a tall African-American 9th grader approached me from the back, grabbed my head, and took my wig off. I fell to the ground on impact and my wig was tossed aside. It took me a minute or two to realize what had happened as I lay there on the ground. His reaction was instantaneous. He burst out laughing and exclaimed,
I was right! Yo! You're a wig girl! The wig girl! The wig girl!
He looked and sounded ecstatic as he continued his victorious laughter. He clapped his hands and moved his body in delirious glee. As he was celebrating his moment of victory after having bullied me for months for wearing a wig, which I had emphatically denied out of insecurity and embarrassment, I was beyond devastated. My heart stopped beating. My face was frozen. My entire body felt numb. I felt as if my life had ended there and then. What just happened felt much worse than the actual physical accidents themselves when I slipped off a cliff at a ski resort over the Christmas holidays several months back. An incident that left me in an induced coma for a couple of days. I felt the psychological blow of humiliation and shock. The world I knew until then came crumbling down. Every passing minute felt like a year as the entire world around me froze in its tracks and everything moved in super slow motion, as if in a movie. I could even see the leaves falling from trees nearby, one by one. Once the blow sank in psychologically, I slowly got up and began picking up my scattered books and stared at my disheveled wig that lay about 100 meters from me. As more students, 7th, 8th, and 9th graders stopped what they were doing to gather around what looked like a crime scene, there I was with my bare head in full public display. The net that keeps the wig together was still on my head as very short hair, no longer than a few centimeters, sprouted through it. Amid the shock, I very briefly tried consoling myself that at least I was dressed nicely. Wearing a chic and expensive pair of stone-washed Guess jeans with a crisp white Armani shirt that my mother had bought for me on sale, along with a pair of K-Swiss white sneakers, the most sought-after brand of the time. Opposite me was the lanky black 9th grader who towered over me in his faded Levi's jeans and a light blue button-down shirt, relishing his moment of conquest. The only thing separating the two of us was the $12.99 wig that had been ripped off my head. Given the gravity of the situation, an eerie sense of silence prevailed in the air, which slowly gave way to quiet murmurs. I wanted to dig a hole or vanish into thin air. If only I could cast a spell. But in the face of this bleak reality and shock, nothing changed. No matter how many times I blinked and pinched myself, everything remained the same. I resented the world. God, why didn't you let me go when I nearly died at the edge of that cliff, instead of letting me face this humiliation? God, are you there? Why are you doing this to me? As I gazed around me, he was nowhere to be found or heard. As silence continued and reality sank in, inexplicable inner strength arose within me. I figured that now that the truth was out, I was indeed the wig girl. There was nothing else for me to hide or lie about. This realization gave me the courage to kneel down to pick up my wig on the ground and put it right back on my head in front of everybody. My attitude was, and now that you guys all know my little secret, get off my back. And then I stood in an upright position and looked directly into my aggressor's eyes. I wanted to strike a blow, but restrained myself and just stared straight into his eyes, intently. I noticed that my newfound courage made him feel uncomfortable and increasingly nervous. We stared at each other without a word for several minutes before he turned around and fled the scene. Crowds then slowly dispersed. Once I was left alone in the corridor, I decided to skip class for the first time ever and then started running. I ran and ran until I no longer had any breath or strength. Before I knew it, darkness set in. I don't know how long I ran or where I was going, but I eventually found my way home. I headed straight up to my bedroom, ignoring questions from my mother as to where I had been all day. I threw down on the bed my distressed $12.99 wig that was soaked from sweat and dirt. I cursed it, threw it on the carpet, and then buried myself in my pillow and sobbed uncontrollably for hours until my eyes could no longer open. I wondered why my life couldn't be normal. I asked why my ordeal just didn't end up in the mountains where I could have vanished into thin air. I asked God why He was putting me through so much hardship and pain when I had done nothing wrong. I attended church services fairly regularly on Sundays, albeit grudgingly at the prodding of my mother. I had committed no major sin. I also resented my mother for buying me the cheapest wig that failed to conceal my plight. A few days after I returned home from surgery in Reno, Nevada, my mother took me to a wig store near downtown Los Angeles. It was my first time in a wig shop, and I was fascinated by the rainbow shade of colors. Blonde, strawberry red, auburn, dark brown, chestnut brown, blue, purple, black, and a variety of shapes: curly, wavy, short, long, medium length with bangs. Allured by the colorful array of wigs, I worked up the courage to take off my beanie. My head was still sore from the operation of removing blood clots from the brain after I had fallen off a cliff in a freak accident over the Christmas holidays, and a series of very visible stitches ran from the crown of my head down towards the back of my ears on the left side. As I busily tried on many different styles, optimism set in over the prospect of returning to school. I had fears straight after surgery over how my life would change now that I looked different. Once I got out of hospital, I worried that I would no longer be the girl who belonged to the in crowd, even though I was still the same person and wore the same clothes. That said, I had lost a lot of weight during my time in hospital, limped with a cane due to a fractured tailbone, had a scar on my forehead, and the senses on my left arm and leg had not yet fully returned. Despite my changed appearance, I was hoping for a miracle so that nobody would know that I had been involved in a huge accident during the year-end break. For a moment, the sight of beautiful wigs instilled hope that somehow my previous life would be restored as if nothing had happened over Christmas. That's when I overheard my mother asking the store owner in Korean, as he happened to be Korean, which ones are the
어떤
cheapest?
가발이 가장 싼가요?
The middle-aged balding man pointed to a few in the corner. He glanced at me and then asked her,
무슨 일이 있었나요? 어린 나이인데.
What happened to your daughter? She's so young.
My mother sighed and said,
아주 끔찍한 사고를 당했어요.
she had a terrible accident. She just got out of surgery after suffering a brain concussion. She awoke from a coma. It's a miracle that she's alive. He then advised,
따님이 아직 예민한 나이니.
Your daughter is at a sensitive age, so you might want to consider these high-quality wigs, which are made of human hair. Very few will notice that she's wearing a wig. She has a pretty face, so I think she'll look quite nice with ones up here. These styles are going very well now.
my mother replied without hesitation.
아직 어리니까 머리가 빨리 자랄 거라서.
She's young, so her hair will grow very quickly, so the wig is going to be temporary. There's no need for such expensive wigs. She strolled towards the row of the cheapest wigs with synthetic hair and then picked one up.
이건 얼마죠?
How much is this one? He replied,
12불 99센트.
$12.99.
The short wig had a side part and somewhat resembled the initial hairstyle sported by the late Princess Diana. Even in my untrained eyes, the $12.99 wig was not pretty or stylish, and I pray to God that would not be my wig. When I put it on, it clearly wasn't as nice as the other ones that I had tried on earlier. Yet I didn't have the guts to tell my mother that I didn't like it for fear that I might end up going home without a wig, so I accepted it without any complaint. When we walked out of the store, she looked at me and said,
Nobody will know you're wearing a wig. I gave you a good face so you can carry any wig. If anybody asks you about your hair at school, you just tell them that you have a new hairstyle, okay?
I truly wanted to believe her and decided to believe her. After I had cried until my eyes disappeared from my face, I told my mother that night that I wasn't going to go to school the next day. She then replied dryly,
That's fine with me, but what will you do the day after and the day after that?
There was still about a month to go before the summer break. Even if I were to transfer schools, the process would take time. After a sleepless night, I sadly came to the conclusion that there was nowhere for me to hide. So the next morning, my father dropped me off at the usual location as I walked slowly into the entrance of my junior high school, with swollen eyes wearing my dirty and distressed wig. None of my classmates or teachers said a word to me throughout the entire day. I also remained silent. I was slightly worried about running into the black boy again, but I never saw him ever again, and I never bothered finding out his name. The incident remains the saddest and most disappointing moment of my life, even to this day. Yet an event that ironically has helped me overcome some of my toughest challenges thereafter. Just as the echoes, "Oh, wig girl," were fading from my mind, I realized that I was alone in the ladies' room. I took a deep breath, wiped away my tears, and decided to pull myself together. Somehow, the current situation seemed trivial compared to the wig incident. All of a sudden, I felt ready to get up and face the world again, just as I did back in school. After touching up my makeup, I went back into the newsroom and went about the rest of the day as if nothing had happened. Working my way up in the world of television was an endurance test like no other, especially as I entered the industry with nothing but hope, ambition, and an unrelenting work ethic. It certainly did not help that I knew not a soul in the industry. Early in my career, I was often replaced by girls who came in with powerful connections. In order to prove myself, I worked day and night, moving from double to triple shifts, accommodating every single request, be it news, production, or programming and marketing departments. The work also required discipline, incredible discipline. Early wake-ups from 3, 4, 5 in the mornings were pretty much the standard. Late shifts ended as late or as early as 1 in the morning due to late-night broadcasts. Personal life took another hit as news continued, rain, snow, or shine throughout the year and even during public holidays. Contrary to the general perception that the TV world is filled with glitz and glamour, one immediately finds out upon joining a TV station that the reality requires so much sacrifice and stamina due to the long hours from conception, research, writing, preparation, filming, editing, and post-production to the final product. I worked through countless nights and weekends in the hopes of making it, moving from one network to another and traveling from one country to another, whether on assignment or in hopes of a better life. When on the road, there were so many things that went wrong that I learned to be patient and bold with myself and the world. What more could I say upon arriving at the airport in Sofia, Bulgaria some years ago on assignment with nothing but a handbag because the airline had lost my suitcase, whereas my cameraman had missed the connecting flight in Paris while duty-free shopping? How about scrambling on barefoot while filming a series of reports in French Guiana just above the Amazon jungle in South America after all of my shoes had fallen apart in the rough terrain? Or feeling crushed and devastated upon being threatened with lawsuit for switching networks as I sought to broaden my horizons? As hard as I worked pushing myself to the limits, I sometimes wondered whether my sacrifices in pursuit of a dream were worthy of the outcome. What is a dream anyway? Why are some of us so caught up with this vague notion of a goal, however unrealistic it may be? What I've learned over the years is that no matter how high I tried to climb up the mountain, once I got ever so close to the peak, the goalpost would drift further away as if a mirage. If our goals and ambitions are just an illusion, how does one find a sense of solace, happiness, balance, and stability amid the chaos in our lives? With every passing year, I learned to work through the personality clashes, demanding schedules and tight deadlines to hone my craft. Even to this day, I believe that these years helped lay the foundation for the rough journey ahead as I sought to broaden my horizons. My worst experiences helped put difficult moments in perspective and nudged me along. Had it not been for these formidable years, I probably wouldn't have been able to breeze through the cold stares and snide comments whenever I walked into a new newsroom. As ironic as it sounds, it's the most difficult experiences that make us stronger and wiser. I learned a very valuable lesson during this time that there are no bad experiences in life. It's a matter of how we overcome them, grow from them, and move on towards a more promising tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed my personal account as extracted from my book that was written in English and then edited and translated in Korean, called Good Morning Singapore, This is Chloe. The book was published in Korea a few years ago. Join me for another fascinating episode right here on Maverick Dreamers and Thinkers. Do subscribe and give us a quick review. If you're on social media, do reach out and share what you think of the podcast. To all the great dreamers out there, I'm Chloe Cho. Take care.